What I want to start out with, and sort of give you an idea of an overview of what we're going to try to do this week. And this is really kind of based on, if you look at cloud hands in a way as a very comprehensive movement in the form. The cloud hands really contains really virtually everything you do in the type. So we already have somebody flying through the screen.
You're recording already.
Since cloud hands is really a very comprehensive movement, and it really contains really all the core things you do in Tai Chi in one movement. And it's really one of the very few moves that does that. And so what do I mean by that? Well, it does several different things. It does one, and the other thing that's nice about cloud hands is it does it in a way that has more symmetry than some of the other moves. I mean, in one sense, every move in Tai Chi has everything contained within it. But a lot of them are very difficult to get at. And there's a balance in cloud hands and a symmetry in cloud hands that makes it in some ways more accessible. And then kind of in a really concise explanation of that, what I mean by that is cloud hands very clearly differentiates what you're doing internally, energetically, between what happens on the Zongding, or your central channel, what happens in the right and left channels, and what happens when the energy crosses from left to right. And it really gives you a very clear map of all those things as you go through the form. Those are really the things that allow you to really understand ultimately how you change Neijing from one energy to another. And cloud hands also systematically changes as you do the motions and the expressions through the four internal jings in a circular pattern that's symmetrical. And so it has that, but what underlies those internal jing changes are the relationships between the right and left channels, the crossing energy, and the Zongding. The other thing that cloud hands also has on top of all that is it has the turning and gathering into and the expansion out of the Zongding, in a cylindrical motion. And again, this is something that occurs in other moves, but it's something that's very clear in cloud hands. And so as you're doing the move, and this comes back to really where the strength of the motion and the strength of your form comes from, is as you move and as you turn, how everything connects ultimately to gather into the Zongding or to come back out of it. And so this move really has all those things and actually puts them all together in a very kind of pretty coherent pattern. If you do it through other moves, you can do it, but it's a lot harder to kind of see it because there's a tendency for one side to be very diminished or one side to be very strong. So the balancing is harder to necessarily pick up. And there's other ones that don't really have as strong of Zongding power. There's other moves that have stronger power, like coming out of like the right side, or there's more power coming out of the side crossing. And every move is sort of a composite of all those. And cloud hands is one of the ones that really is clear about how it goes into the center and comes back out. And that's one of the things that makes it really nice as a move to understand the form. Okay? So that's basically what we're going to kind of work on. Now, let's say, for example, I'm just standing in a parallel stance. And I'm not going to worry about stepping at this point. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn like I'm doing a simplified cloud hands for a minute. Now, the first thing that has to happen is as my waist turns in this direction, my leg, and for now I want it just lengthened out. I'm not going to worry about pumping my joints or anything at this point. I want to just have a good lengthening from my pelvis down my leg. This leg twists this way. This leg twists this way. Now this seems not like anything that's really major. Everybody, I think, is kind of have a sense of this. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to just work at shifting side to side and keeping both of those continually going and getting them changing at the same time. But here's the kicker. What you have to do is you got to do it with enough of a stance, and it might have to be a deeper stance than you usually work in, that the twists connect through the underside of your groin and your perineum. So you actually feel the pull here connect to the pull there. And you need to get that, so that's like one continuous pulling from side to side, and it doesn't have a break in the middle. It's not like this one's doing one thing, this one's doing another thing. You have to get it so from this foot through your torso down to this foot, they go together. Okay, so just to kind of summarize quickly kind of what we did last night. I think it's worthwhile to do that. Starting out by getting the pull of the psoas up into the back and getting that to turn the body. So the pulling and pushing through the legs turns the body. Then having that, making sure it gets connected all the way to your spine, so that as you turn, the spine turns and it's balanced, so you're not putting a kink into your spine anymore. Then it's bringing that so that the center of the rotation is around the zongbing rather than the spine just moving sort of randomly. It's really so it turns your body around your zongbing. And that's then in turn used to help you go back to studying your alignments through your legs. So that, and I did this by checking your feet and stuff, so like as you're shifting side to side and you're moving around your center, the alignments through your legs get then adjusted a little bit as much as you need to allow you to be stable in the turn and at the same time have everything go back and forth and slosh between the feet in a way that doesn't affect or disrupt the alignments. Okay? Now, the other thing we work on, and just toward the end, the last thing we're kind of working with, was as you're shifting, we're talking about kind of really relaxing in the hip and in the legs, and so that there's that sense of the weight dropping and kind of bouncing off the ground, and how that bounce helps you move from direction to direction without there becoming a static spot. Now, there's another component to that in cloudhouse. And it's sort of like inside of your hips as you drop and you're going into that bounce, there's also the capacity for them to kind of move slightly in the vertical plane. So what happens is you both have this relaxation in the drop, but at the same time it's like if you looked at your overall motion right here, it's a very slight and very, very elongated figure eight. Mm-hmm. And so you're turning here, you're not coming here and stopping and turning back here and stopping. Rather, you're turning here and then it comes out. But it comes out by coming back around. And you can really exaggerate this, and some people in their forms really exaggerate this quite a bit. And that's fine. But this is one of the ways you don't end up with a static pull. And even if you're doing it where it almost looks like, if I'm doing cloud hands like this, it almost looks like I'm coming here, stopping, and going back this other direction. I actually still don't. I have this very slight reversal in there. But again, allows the motion to become continuous.
Does it matter which direction you do the figure eight?
Yeah. As I'm turning this way, the figure eight happens because I'm going this hip goes this way, so then it goes back that way rather than.
Well, you can do the figure eight so it either comes out on the outside or comes out on the inside and goes around this way.
Right.
So you want it to go on the outside and
Yes.
come back around
Yes.
on the inside.
Around this way and back this way. This keeps you from becoming static at the ankles.
What about the sensation of a spiral right down through the bubbling well?
Well, this is part of that, because spiraling really comes from a combination of turning and opening and closing. And for now, just since we haven't really worked the opening and closing yet, the dropping is part of it. And that's going to help get that, because as I drop and turn, it creates a spiral. I mean, if you come here and just like grab my thigh or something, I'll do this. You know, feel this, okay? And down lower in my foot. So it's not static.
Right.
Anyway down the road, not through your legs.
It's no point it stops and comes back.
Yeah. It's always.
So in the leg, you can sort of feel a downward spiraling.
Totally,
Uh-huh.
yeah. And you can feel the direction where it goes around the outside of his leg, it goes in the back and goes around the other outside.
Okay. So I want to work a little bit on this kind of deal, the elongated figure eight. And that's the way to think of it, because if you think of it as a figure eight, you'll start doing this. Too much. It's very small. But just work on that a little bit along with that drop and rebound. There's a question here, and Paul was talking about, well, if I do this, should I be spiraling like in my thighs and stuff? Yes, but you don't want to try to make it happen locally in your arms. In other words, you don't, to make the spiraling happen in your legs, you don't want to do it by like trying to make like this muscle go in or anything like that, because when you do that, what you're doing, you're going to put too much stress and tension into the muscle for it actually to be able to really do it naturally. And you don't have to do that. All you really have to do to make your legs spiral is loosen the muscles enough and have the combination of the closing and opening and the turning of the waist. The spirals will happen. And yes, there's a right and wrong way. There's a right way for the spirals to go, but if you're loose, actually, they will naturally do it the right way. And so you're not trying to make it happen, because if you try to make it happen, you're going to always have too much tension. And you might get a little bit of motion there, but you'll never actually get the right action to take place. And the other problem with it, and this is really the big problem with doing that, is lots of times, if I go here and I say, okay, I'm going to really try to make my thigh spiral out, it puts an unnatural twist into like my knee and ankle. And so rather than the actual weight and everything going down and into the ground the way it should be, I'm actually jamming it into my knee because I'm trying to force it the wrong way. That's really the reason not to. Okay?
The energetic sensation.
Well, it's also physical, but the physical sensation comes from allowing the tissue to become real loose, and so it can move freely. And the spiral comes because you're turning and you're compressing and opening. It's the combination of those two things. It's a combination of opening and closing and turning. If you stop doing one of those two things, you'll stop spiraling.
Okay,
There's another thing too. Your feet will affect the kind of the stretch that you get through the muscles. So if you're real open like this, you're not going to get the same kind of spiral.
Right. I mean, depending on the structure of your stance, the spirals will change. The less important part of the movement, but the part that you have to have actually to go into doing the rest of it. And what I'll do is I'll do this both in Yang style and Wu style, and kind of and show the two differences because they are slightly different in terms of timing, and there's a couple things that are kind of a little bit different. My suggestion Michael, would be to do the Yang style version, just because it's more, it's a little more symmetrical. The Wu style adds like an extra change that you don't really have to do. That's a nice side too, but at this point, you might as well try to keep it simpler rather than making it more complex. Okay, so I'll start out. I'll do the Yang style, and I'm going to do this without stepping, and later on in the day. Oh, you want to turn it up? Later on, I'll go back into the stepping and the timing of all the stuff. For now, I'm just going to do it without the steps. Okay. Now we've worked on kind of this idea of dropping and at the same time a slight figure eight elongation at the two side points. But the other very important point in cloud hands is dead center, straightforward. So this is like the middle point. And this point is really equally important to these points because it's the other point where a bunch of changes internally take place. So you have movement from here across. It doesn't really stop here in the center, but that center point is one that you want to make sure you kind of really hit in a line, and you pass through it into this other one. Now the hands do a relatively simple movement. If you start out on one side, it's like the two hands are facing each other. But energetically, they're doing something very different. This hand is in the process of drawing in, and this hand is in the process of pushing out from the fingertips. So it's almost like this, rather than this. It's this connection. It's important. And that runs through your back also, so that they're really put together. Okay, then here's the first change. So you're at this point, the bounce happens, and you're going to come into the rebound. As you come into the rebound, this hand pushes down, this hand comes up. So and then they come to a center point where you're like holding a barrel almost. And then as you shift, and they rebound, now the center point here, my weight's actually already shifted, but I'm dead forward. That's what you're doing. I want to hit this place. And this is always tricky because you're pushing down, and this one's coming up, and then this hand is like behind, and it has to catch up. And it's hard to get it to do that sometimes. Like you have to be able to move at different rates. But if I do this a little more fluidly, now the Wu style, in contrast, adds another piece at the end. So here you're doing the same thing, pushing down, rising. Here you're doing the same thing, drawing in on the top hand, pushing out on the bottom, and then they join, and they both triangulate into this palm, into the strike. And then it pushes down and it comes up. And try and get us into a circle.
Are you using cross energy on that?
Well, yes, but in what we kind of think of as the cross-body energy is that connection we were working yesterday. That's really it, the one that gets out from the hand from this leg. That's not the only thing. There's also all the pumps opening on the channels and stuff. And we'll get into that. So
Right,
there's other
but
things.
when that hand goes down, it's affecting the opposite leg. Or the opposite leg is affecting that hand.
One of the things is that, yeah. I mean, there is that connection between the two arms, so this pushing down helps lift it.
Is there any coinciding with that weight, that leg on that side? Or are you really, in the end, going to be trying to separate those two to across?
Here?
Right.
At this point, you're still actually turning in the same direction. But the timing off the rebound is different. Because what happens here is I sink, and in the rebound I open and continue my turn in the same direction rather than reversing the spiral on the right leg. I actually reverse it at the top of that bounce. That kind of exaggerate.
So that your palm out, the side that's striking with the palm out, anything come out of that weighted leg from that?
Oh, yeah. A lot. And we'll go into that. But that has to do with left and right channels.
Okay.
Because that's one of the other two of the three major components is what happened. And we'll probably get to this afternoon. Okay? So what I'd like for you to do is I'd like you to just take whichever one of these you want. If you know both of them, you can work on both of them. And just try to kind of really get that basic motion and timings. So, see here. So I'm drawing in, pushing out, and then bounce, and it reverses. One of the next thing I want to work on, let's go back to what we were doing last night. Remember when we were doing the turning and we got the arms connected into the back also, so that you could turn from the legs and get rotation. Well, there's a second component of waist movement in Tai Chi. And in the Tai Chi classics, it's actually two different characters and they're distinguished quite a bit in the phrase. One is the waist works like kind of like the axle of a wheel. And that's what we were working on. That's this turning around the center. The second type of waist movement is, in the classics it says the waist is the commander, or it's like a banner. It's like a banner flag. And so it's like this thing that leads. This component of it is talking partially about the vertical motion of the waist. So your waist has, in Tai Chi, two components. It turns, but at the same time it has compression and expansion. Last night, when we were working on hooking up the turn into the arms, well, let's say, just as an little example here, I have this place where I'm coming out, I've done this bounce like we've been doing. And the kind of the surge from the bounce is coming up my body. To get that power up into the arms, the waist basically pumps in this vertical fashion. And so when I do a move that involves any sort of compression and expansion, it's not just in my legs, it's also in my waist. And what this has the effect doing is it transfers a lot of the power up the spine and up through the torso and can help get up into the The other thing that you're stuck with if you don't develop the pumping vertically of your waist is you can line your body up, basically make this static push with your legs. And that's okay. It's not as effective, it doesn't change as fast, and it's not as powerful, but it's not bad. Because you're still using your legs instead of using your upper body for your strength. So the component of the vertical motion of the waist is really very important in Tai Chi. And as an example of this, yeah, let me just do some. And so it looks more dramatic. Let's say I'm doing this stuff. You see what happened there? To my waist. It went from here to there. So along with the power that's coming from the legs, there's also the power that's coming from the opening of the waist. And effectively what this does is it helps transfer the strength. And it actually adds to it as well, up through into your upper body. And as a little side from that, the further up my arms and elbows get, remember how as your elbows go out, the connecting point goes higher in your body? If you do that without pumping your waist, it's very, very hard to get power up to that part of your body. What happens is it will just, you end up doing it locally in your upper body instead of doing it from your legs. So this is kind of like, this is the thing that allows you to get all the strength from, which about as high as it gets is here, up here.
I have a question about center to periphery versus the linear expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a kind of a combo platter of those two things? I mean, is center to periphery an operable idea for that?
Not really.
Okay,
No,
all right.
No, this is, because this is really, this isn't talking so much about what you're doing energetically with your chi.
I see.
This is really the physical pumping of the waist. Down.
It's different from the spine opening.
Well, no, it's very much related to what happens in your spine. But,
But you can actually keep your spine closed and up your waist.
yeah, I mean, if you really have a lot of control of it. I'm sort of avoiding going into all the intricacies of the spine right now, just because that sort of just becomes an entire topic in and of itself. So, but for now, what I do want to have you start getting is the sense of when you go in cloud hands, and like I'm coming around here and I'm going into like my leg and I'm doing the drop and relaxing, well, my waist is also doing this. And then as I rebound, my waist opens. And it's done very slowly and very smoothly. That's one of the hard things to get. So it becomes very continuous.
The center point is the apex of the opening then, of the expansion of the waist.
Yeah.
And
The center
And now it drops. So here, it's closed.
Mhm.
Yeah. At its maximum. It reverses, fills to the center point, and then it starts falling in as you turn into that.
But you've already shifted the weight.
You've already shifted the weight.
He's most stretched
So
out.
here, I'm most
Oh,
stretched out.
that's it.
This side. And down.
Of the transition.
Yeah.
So it's coordinated with the balance.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, you're most stretched out at this center position, not at the opening?
Now this, let me explain the difference. This is a difference between Yang and Wusa. That explanation is Yang stuff. Let me explain Wusa, because it's different. There's a double bounce in Wu style.
Yeah.
In essence. So, in Wu style, and I should go through with the hands because otherwise you might miss stakes in places. Coming from the center I'm open,
Okay.
just like in Neo.
Uh-huh.
Here, it's closing down. Bounce,
Uh-huh.
it opens. Continues to open all the way through to here. So it has a real continuous opening. The opening doesn't max out here. I mean, you could if you were really trying to maximize the power of that strike. But then you wouldn't have much for that. So in terms of form practice, you want to kind of proportion out the opening of the ways between the strike and the... Okay, so remember last night we did this stuff where we got the arms connected to the rotation. You still need to have that connection. And wherever your arms are on your, kind of along your torso, you need the pump of the waist needs to be able to get that high. And so as it goes higher up into the shoulders, it's harder to get it. But however much that pump is, it's got to at least get up to that part of the back where the arms connect. Now, if someone wants to get pushed, okay.
Everyone should feel this.
If I go to push J and I just line myself up and I use my legs, I can get some power that way. And I can do it because basically I have this and I have the kind of spring strength through my legs. But this is not as effective or as strong as if I actually pump as well as that. So if I come in here, it's got lots of power. But that's because that is being reinforced by that. And a lot more of that strength gets up into your upper body. And so it's the difference between being hit kind of by something that's kind of semi-rigid. You know, the torso doesn't move, my legs move. And then being hit by something that's got all the body. And so it allows you to really use your whole body, but it's integrated so that the power is joined.
You ever had a big wave just...
And that's really how it feels. It feels like being picked up and slammed by a wave, rather than like being hit by like a blood pipe or something like that. That's a very different kind of sensation. I mean, if you want to...
I would love to feel it.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll push you kind of the first way, so you feel that. And go ahead and ground yourself this time. So you've got some solidity. And the next time, this time I'll kind of compress and really use the whole body.
Whoa! That's cool. Oh, yeah.
Very different sensation. And it's very hard to read it. You kind of don't feel it until it's like all of a sudden you're just out there.
That's a good thing there's a wall there.
Yeah. And so and the nice thing about it from a martial standpoint, it's very hard for you to get a read on how do I hold this off even, because it kind of takes you.
I couldn't, the second one I couldn't feel at all where it was coming from.
Yeah, and then it's like all of a sudden you're just.
It was like the wind. It's like getting caught in a hurricane. You know, you're trying to like hold on, the hurricane just blows you out of it.
Yeah.
That's cool. It feels great too.
Yeah, it actually is a very nice feeling.
Wow.
So if anyone else wants to feel it, you have them.
Get my bi-yearly dose.
Yeah. No, just one thing about this type of stuff, getting pushed. This is actually in Tai Chi, this is how you usually actually get to understand it. Because if you don't actually have the real sensation of feeling it, it's very hard to kind of piece it together. Sort of like that gives you the thing that you know kind of what you're going for.
And I don't have to do it real hard, I can do it from my line. So like here, and the interesting thing is, build grounds harder, it actually becomes stronger, because I actually take this. Now, if I just do this with my legs, I can still move it. But it doesn't have that kind of fluid power in it. It really doesn't have that. Smart.
That is different.
Next.
Next. Go a little closer.
Ground, Margaret.
Yeah.
Don't let him push it. Don't let.
Great
The first
face.
one, I'm just using my legs.
Okay,
And then the next,
yeah, very different.
yeah, it's like you're falling into it. It sort of just picks you up.
Mhm.
And so it's got a very different quality.
Can you do me like you did her?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. Last thing I want to do is hurt somebody.
I don't know what you want.
Yeah. Well. Okay, so the first thing, and this is how really most people push. Kind of line their body up. This is fairly static, and they push with the left.
Wow, that was light.
This,
Oh, yeah.
and it's sort of like you don't get the read of where the power's coming from. Is one of the things that's.
There's something gentler about it too. There's.
No, it doesn't have to be. Believe me.
Okay.
I did it real life.
It's-
But
but I felt like you were like working more within my body.
Yeah. Well, it
It's harder
requires a
to
better
read,
read
yeah.
of the person's body, because you're not just empowering them,
Yeah,
you're changing with how their body is reacting to it.
rather than.
Okay, so last night, we were doing the turning from the legs. And when you get your arms connected, it became real strong. So it's the turn of the waist is quite strong. Well, if you add to that the pumping of the waist, so you're pumping open as you come back to the center, coming back down, pumping open as you come back to the center. It'll become even stronger. The neat thing about the pumping of the waist is, as you become more sensitive in your own body, you can sort of refine the strength and take it to a particular place. And so you can focus it. And the pumping helps kind of focus it. Because there's kind of that natural surge you feel in your body. Well, if you can kind of learn how to kind of direct that, you can, like in this case, I can make this arm quite a bit, even more substantial than I would just by turning.
Because you're also hooking up, like you were saying before, hooking up from down here up through the trapezoids.
Right. But now, along with the turn, there's also this lengthening that's going on. So that, the strength of that tension.
Diagonal flying.
I actually see it in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
But try doing this with a partner. Like, so someone comes up here. What I'll do is at first, I want to have Bill just, I'm going to do just a turn like we were doing last night. So he's going to try to hold me. And I'm going to turn with my legs and waist. Now, if I really get my arms connected up there, I don't know if you saw that difference, but I just got my arms
I saw it in your feet.
Yeah. Okay, but now I'm going to do something slightly different.
I'm going to go like into this side and pump out of it as well. So I'm going to turn my legs and pump. And just that action gives it a little bit more power. And the interesting thing is the pump doesn't give you that much radial power, it gives you vertical power in a sense. But it also contributes.
Because that lifts them up so that the
Well, yeah, partially. I mean, it's,
radial power you have
Yeah,
is
yeah.
expressed.
but it's
more
also
fully.
just here, when I come out of this now, it's not just a turn, it's a lift. And if you look at cloud hands, that's what's going on. So we've gone through this, kind of got a pattern. We've got these change points, the center and the two sides. And we've worked some of the changes that take place at these places with the arms and some of the changes that take place with shifting in the weight of the side. Okay. To kind of go back to what I talked about in the very beginning, there's three components that contribute to the overall power of any move in Tai Chi. The power that comes from the Zongding, and that's what that's going to be a big part of the next weekend. So we're probably not going to even touch on that this week. But that's one of the components, and that's actually really the strongest of all of these, and it's the most core one. It's also the hardest one to get rid of. But it's really, that's one of the main ones. There's what we have been doing, which is really the action of cross-body connection. So it's how the power from this leg gets focused into this hand, which is the turn, the pull and the turn. The pull and the turn here drives this. Drives this. So you have this pulling that comes up the leg, actually goes through the pelvis, up the spine, around and out. And if you look in a lot of Tai Chi books, they all draw little lines that go across the body, but I don't think they ever tell you why they draw them. That's what that line is supposed to signify. So here, in like Yang style, this leg is coming up through. Now, the third set of things that contribute to the power are what happen on the two sides. And every move in Tai Chi is a combination of those three things. Sometimes they're done all focused into one thing. Sometimes they're done where they're really separated. But there's always combinations of those three things contributing to the power of the move. It's not always in the same kind of ratio. There's some moves that really derive almost all the power from like the cross body. There's other ones that derive almost all the power from the center. But it's always a combination of those three things that give a move. It's kind of complete structure and integrity. So,
you're talking physical, you're talking alignment power rather than energetic power?
well, there's kind of an interesting line here because when you start dealing with left and right channels, you're really starting to deal with more energetic power than you are, because there's not like an actual physiological connection there. Okay? So yeah, so now it's kind of going into the realm of you're starting to deal with what starts happening with your chi. And the previous stuff we've been doing is pretty mechanical in the sense it's pretty subtle mechanics, but it's mechanics. Some of this is related to mechanics. Because what we're going to be concentrating on, and a lot of you are familiar with this, but the 4 deep points, in your 2 deep in your shoulders and 2 deep in your quad. But also the joints, through your arms, through your legs, through your back. So it's really all the joints of your body. So you can kind of think of this as what happens with the right and left is regulated primarily by 2 things. What happens in the joints and what happens in some cavities in the body. Just like where these points in the shoulders are. There's not a joint there, but it's a place in the soft tissue where everything can kind of pull in and expand out. Now, one of the things that this does, or both of those actions do, is it helps pump a lot of the fluids in your body. And as you pump more fluids in your body, it develops more of the yin power, because that comes from these fluid pumps. And when you get these things going, basically in Tai Chi you do 2 things. You have the left channel and the right channel, and you divide them basically at the waist. And so when you make changes, you can change like the joints and the cavities in your lower body differently than you can the joints and the cavities in the upper body, or side to side. So you end up with basically 4 different possibilities, 4 different places where you can have change. So as I go through cloud hands in particular, and maybe just a real brief summary of this. And this is something that, Michael, you might want to kind of just maybe even try to get together with some people if you're going to be around to kind of work at, because it's a little more complex, and some of it takes some time to kind of get a handle on. And some of this you might have in your body. You might have this kind of ability to kind of feel like you can really just draw things into it and have them expand, and your joints really pump open and close. And that's kind of what underlies this. But in a real simple way, and I'm just going to summarize this, the opening movement of Tai Chi contains 4 basic internal changes. Each one of those changes correspond with these actions in the joints. In the opening move, it's done symmetrically on both sides. So you're doing the same things on both channels. And to start out, the first thing I'm doing is I'm closing down my lower ones and opening my upper ones. Then I open all of them. Then I close all of them. Then I open the bottom ones and close the top ones. So again, I'm opening the top, I'm closing the bottom. I'm opening top and bottom. I'm closing top and bottom. I'm opening the bottom and closing the top. This fundamentally is one of the ways that you regulate the pulsing and the kind of the chi through your body, and it is part of what comes to be expressed as the 4 primary jings or powers in Tai Chi. And sometimes you might have heard me saying like, oh, Peng and On. Well, the people who've been doing this for a while, they know what that means. But what it means is this. Peng is this first one, where you're closing down the lower body and opening up the upper body. The next one, where both open, is Ji. The next one where both close is Liu. And the one where the bottom opens and the top closes is On. And those kind of translate roughly as what's called warding off. So Peng is used to kind of hold off something. It's a very kind of shield-like sense. Ji, which is usually translated as pressing, is focusing that opening into like one point. So it's very directed. Liu is kind of the opposite of that. It's like sucking everything back into the center. And On creates a downward pushing. And those are the 4 fundamental things in Tai Chi, or what's 4 of the 13 postures. Well, in cloud hands, you're doing that too, but it's a little more complicated because you're doing the changes in the lower body out of phase with the changes in the upper body. But they're doing it in all these nice places we've already looked at. So if I go and I start out, I'm going to look at what's happening in my lower body. As I go from the center to one side, my joints to my legs and my lower body close. So there's a sense of, through both legs, everything is kind of coming in, compressing, pulling up into my stomach. Okay? When I go back to the center point, they open. Now this would all make sense, but it's wrong. And the reason it's wrong is because I'm only doing it top and bottom. I haven't distinguished side to side. What you have to do in cloud hands is you have to get side to side change. Look, if I'm going from the center to this side, I'm doing on the top, Liu. So this is pulling into the center. Well, if it's Liu, it's everything on this side is pulling into the center. So this leg is closing in. But this leg, which is with this arm, is opening up because it's doing G. So I have one side of my body closing and one side of my body open. Now when I go to do on, which is the push down, and pump, which is the rising, this is open. As I complete the G, this is open. As I go into pump, this continues to stay open. This starts closing, which brings me to the center. At the same time, this side, which is doing the on, has gone from the shoulder being closed and the quad being closed in. Now, the quad is going to open. The shoulder is going to continue pushing down to the center. So what you get is the arm changes and the leg changes happen at different points. The leg changes occur here. My shoulder's still closing, my shoulder's still open. So I look at just my shoulders. Here's an open here and a close here. Those are both still doing the same thing, opening and closing. Back to the center. Now, this one which is open, this one which is closed, they're going to switch. This one's going to start closing, this one's going to start open. And it's going to continue opening and closing back to the center. So here this is open, this is closed. Now this is going to start closing, this will start opening. That occurs continuously till the center. Close here, start opening here, close here.